Hey guys, Christoph the Polish Geek, and welcome to my first review after vacation. I already did the Nature Adventure video, but now you have my very first movie review after the vacation, and it will be the last voyage of Demeter. Like, what did I think of this movie? I have to say, I was not a huge fan of it. First, I have to say, I was kind of looking forward to this movie, even though I was pretty cautious too, because I'm a huge fan of Dracula. Hell, you can probably see by how much I talk about Castlevania and how much I adore Castlevania games that I love Dracula. And I do love original Bram Stoker's book too. Still, objectively speaking, Castlevania is certainly not an adaptation of the Bram Stoker's original novel. In fact, it's almost an entirely different story that simply uses Dracula and other classic horror monsters, but nonetheless, still the Castlevania version of Dracula is by far my favorite version of a classic vampire villain. Yeah, the Castlevania version, whether the show version or the video games version, is by far my favorite version of the character ever. But now when it comes to actual adaptations of the book though, I have to say Bela Lugosi Dracula All the Way is the best version of the book Dracula ever. Like, yeah, you can't really top Bela Lugosi version, although I thought the most recent Nicolas Cage version Renfield was also pretty great. It was certainly best modern take. Outside of the Netflix Castlevania, of course, but it's a different story. Still, when it comes to live action Dracula at least, then yeah, Bela Lugosi by far is the best. But Nicolas Cage also comes close. And when it comes to favorite movies about Dracula, then yeah, it's either the Bela Lugosi one or the even older movie Nosferatu. So returning to Voyage of the Demeter, it's actually not an adaptation of the whole book. It's more like an adaptation of one single chapter of the book about the ship Demeter that sank. But I have to say, as I already said, I was not a huge fan of the movie. I was kind of cautious about it, but I was also cautiously optimistic about it. But ultimately, I didn't really like the movie. I did really like the cinematography and the atmosphere of the movie, like that was really amazing. So the atmosphere is probably by far the best part of the movie. Like, I love the way the Demeter is presented. It's like a very dark ship, and then the scenes, especially in a night in the storm, are amazing. Like, those are very atmospheric and totally and totally add to the creepy atmosphere. And in some ways, it totally feels like an atmosphere you would expect in a Bram Stoker's Dracula. So yes, the atmosphere of the movie is by far the best part, and also the shots of the Demeter ship in a storm are by far the best shots in the movie, and that's the best part. Now though, we have to come on to negatives of the movie. The story is like a classical horror story, like a ship departs from Bulgaria to London and the crew members die one by one, and then they learn that there is a huge evil that hides on the ship, which is of course Dracula. And if you read the Bram Stoker's novel, you'll get far more better idea about the whole context of the situation. But nonetheless, I really thought that one chapter was actually a pretty interesting idea for a movie. So overall, I think the concept sounds really good, but ultimately, the part where the movie most suffers, I think, is the characters. Like, it's almost like there are lots of characters in the movie, and the movie barely fleshes out any of them. It's like I couldn't really connect or didn't find any of the characters likable or relatable. They were all just felt like so bland and so flat, like, yeah, I didn't really like the characters. And it's really a shame too that the characters are not that likable, because the cast is actually pretty good. Like Liam Cunningham from Game of Thrones, for example, plays one of the lead roles, and he could totally have a potential to be a wonderful character he was playing, although sadly the script didn't really give it much for him to make us care about him really all that much. Another issue I had with the movie was the portrayal of Dracula. It's pretty obvious they wanted to do the Nosferatu approach and portray him as an actual dangerous monster as opposed of like a wealthy aristocrat. So yeah, it's pretty obvious to me that they decided to do the Nosferatu version as opposed to the most versions we imagine today, like the Bela Lugosi version, which basically set the standard for Dracula anyway. So yeah, this is obvious to me that they wanted to go back to how people would imagine Dracula before the Bela Lugosi, which was like this dangerous monster like in Nosferatu, but I don't think they really executed it well. I thought it was a pretty bold and smart move to give us something different than what we are usually used to, but they didn't execute it well. Dracula didn't really feel like a character. He felt like nothing more than a plot device. He felt like just some random dangerous creature they had to fight. Yeah, they clearly stated it was Dracula and all that, but for some reason I didn't really find him that intimidating. I don't know why. Maybe some people did, and if you did, I'm happy for you. But personally, for me, he felt like just some like mindless monster as opposed of an actual dangerous vampire that he was supposed to be. So yes, I have to say I was not a huge fan of this portrayal of Dracula. And if I have to compare him to the other live action Dracula we got this year, which was of course Nicolas Cage in Renfield, that Dracula was much better. Although the Renfield version of Dracula, that was certainly much more close, that was certainly very much classic Dracula that we all now imagine Dracula to be, but certainly I thought he was much better than this Dracula. Which is a shame too, because as I said, making Dracula closer to Nosferatu as opposed to the modern interpretation of him that was set up really by Bela Lugosi, I think it was a pretty bold and smart move, but sadly it wasn't executed well. And another thing I didn't like is that the movie really set up some interesting story and theme, which was religion versus science. Like, there is a character who is very much a man of science, while most characters are very much religious people who believe in superstitions. And that could really set up for some interesting conflict and story. A man of science who doesn't believe in supernatural is suddenly pitted against like supernatural evil. That could be create for some real interesting story, but sadly it doesn't go anywhere and there is no payoff to that story whatsoever. It's like it sets up the story and then it goes nowhere. Yep. Which is a shame, because honestly science versus religion is actually one of my favorite themes that's discussed in stories. But this movie basically introduced the concept and like quickly forgot about it without any payoff whatsoever. And yes, there was political messaging in this movie too. I won't really get into it, but yes, there was some political messaging. It wasn't really like a big deal in this case because the movie was like pretty disappointing anyway, and the like political messaging is really the smallest problem of a movie that already has plenty of them. But I'm just giving you a heads up that yes, there is political messaging. And even the ending of the movie was like pretty disappointing, like because the end of the movie, in the end of the original chapter of the book, there was supposed to be no survivors on Demeter, but here there is one survivor who then decides to hunt down Dracula, and that's pretty stupid because we all know that in the original novel Dracula was ultimately supposed to be defeated by no one other than Van Helsing. I mean, yeah, for me at least, the real Dracula should always be defeated by Belmont, but leaving aside my love for the Castlevania, like, it was Van Helsing who was supposed to defeat Dracula. Van Helsing, not some random new character that nobody ever knows about. But yes, I think that they are obviously made one survivor who then swears to hunt down Dracula because they obviously want to make a sequel, even though this is not the type of story that warrants a sequel, because it's supposed to be based on a chapter from the book. So yes, it's obvious that they want to make a sequel to this movie, even though this is not the type of movie that's supposed to have a sequel. But oh well, what do you expect from most modern Hollywood writers anyway? Overall, The Last Voyage of the Demeter has a fantastic atmosphere and amazing cinematography, but ultimately it suffers from bland, boring characters, lots of interesting but completely wasted potential, and a pretty boring story. So ultimately I sadly have to give the movie thumbs down. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. Press the like button. Please subscribe to this channel, and I'll talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you soon. Bye.